Hello, this is Cynthia Dyer, and I'm with Sargent Al Hancock, and we're here filming for the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. And Sergeant Hancock, if you don't mind, please state your full name and spell it, and then tell us a little bit about where you were born and your original birth family.
My first name is Alan, Allan, middle name Lyle, Lyle, last name Hancock, Hancock. And I was born and raised in Minnesota. Um, I went to first schools were in Forest Lake, Minnesota, and Wyoming, Minnesota. And from that point, my folks moved to Ogilvie, Minnesota, where I graduated from high school. And when I got out of high school, I just didn't want to be like a lot of the other guys I knew in the area that just never left the area. They just they didn't have much to go as far as jobs in the area. They would have had to travel either down to the Twin Cities or someplace in the according the area around there to find some employment. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I decided to check into the military. So I enlisted when I was 17, much to the dismay of my parents.
Mm.
Um, they, I went to all the different recruiters, and I originally was leaning towards the Marines, uh, and I went to all the recruiters, like I said, and the only reason I went with the Air Force was because that recruiter did the best job of lying to me. He told me that if I signed up and I gave him a list of three different branches or three different career fields,
Mhm.
I would get for sure one of them. Well, I listed three different ones that I was interested in, and mechanics and electronics and that sort of thing. Well, it turned out that they needed. I was. This is in the heart of Vietnam, and they needed people in the career field called the munitions maintenance experts, which were the people that loaded the armament on the aircraft. So that's where my schooling went to. I first went to basic training in San Antonio, Texas.
What year might this be?
That would have been 1965.
Gotcha. Okay.
I went to basic training in San Antonio
Uh-huh.
in August of 1965. Talk about hot. I was used to Minnesota weather, and I got down to Texas, and I really found out what heat was about.
Wow.
But I learned to love heat. I really did. Um, After basic training, I went to my tech school was in Denver, Colorado. I went to tech school there for 14 weeks on munitions maintenance
Mhm.
and loading procedures on aircraft. And then about 2 weeks before I was getting ready to graduate from there, they told me that they wanted to keep the top two students in each class for 10 classes to stay as instructors and meant an automatic promotion. And plus, I was dating a girl at the time in Denver, so I thought that'd be a great thing. Well, I made it through about 4 weeks of the instructors training school, and they decided they kept too many for the instructor school, so we're gonna be sent back. So I was one of them that was gonna be sent back. So I went back to my company commander and I said, well, I'd like my old orders back because before I agreed to go to instructors training school, I had orders for 3 years in England. And he said, well, you're not going to England. He said, when you decided to stay here for instructor school, somebody else took your slot. We've got a different assignment for you, and that's in Bangor, Maine. And I went, oh man, that's like staying in Minnesota. So I went through 14 months in uh, Bangor, Maine, working on FO1 fighter jets. They carry both conventional and nuclear weapons. And I didn't like being in Bangor, Maine that much, so I started putting in volunteer statements for Vietnam. I started volunteering then. And I got my wish, and I was sent to Vietnam. I was 19, I believe, when I got there.
And do you do the same thing in Vietnam that you were been trained for, the munitions?
No, I skipped one little spot there.
Oh.
When I was assigned to go to Vietnam,
Mhm.
I was going to be working on the F-100 Super Sabre, which is a fighter bomber.
Okay.
And they sent me down to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for a month's training on just that specific aircraft.
Okay.
So then when I got to Vietnam, uh, I was at a base that was fairly um, it was located out in kind of a deserty area south of Cam Ranh Bay.
Okay.
We were pretty kept away from a lot of the hardships that the grunts did out in the bush. But we did get our chance of mortars and rockets being. So, in fact, a good friend of mine was killed right in front of me.
Oh.
So I uh, I was due to come back from Vietnam, and about a few weeks before I was due to leave Vietnam, we had a call from the over the squadron that anybody that had a discharge date between a certain date and a certain date, they were supposed to go to the base chapel for a meeting at the commander's hall. So I went to that, and it turned out that they were going to say anybody that had discharge dates in that date was going to get a 6 month early out if they wanted it. Well, I skipped ahead there a little bit because I got married before I left of Vietnam because I got a girl pregnant in Bangor, Maine, and I had a daughter that I'd never seen. So this is getting a little bit just junkered, but I came back from Vietnam and uh, I took a few minor jobs working in factories and things like that. Didn't like it. Tried to be a salesman. I hated that. So I saw an ad in the newspaper for the Minneapolis Police Department was looking for new recruits. So I started taking the test for that, and I graduated high in the class, and I wound up going on Minneapolis Police Department in January of 1969. And then I did 22 and a half years on the police department in Minneapolis. During my early years on the department, I had the misfortune of my first wife, who we weren't getting along very well, and it was going to lead to a divorce. And we had talked about it, and she said, "Yeah, we should." And I said, "I agree," but I said, "The only thing I want is Tammy, my daughter." I should have said that. She one day I was out on a motorcycle ride with some friends of mine, and I came home, and my yard was full of squad cars and everything else. And it turned out that she took my off-duty gun because I was on the police department at that time, and she shot my daughter through the heart, and then she killed herself. So I'm not sure where that's leading, other than the fact that I had trouble with relating to women for quite some time. I still managed to get married 3 more times, but none of them lasted more than 3 years. And I would, and part of that, no, 90% of that was my problem because I had turned into a raging alcoholic. A lot of that I based back from being what I'd seen and saw in Vietnam and how I felt about the war and everything else. But I didn't meet the right woman yet. Just to skip ahead, way ahead now, I'm currently married. My wife will be 34 years, and we're extremely happy. Uh, she's been the light of my life.
Good.
And she has gone through so much with me, including I was going through psychiatric evals from
Sure.
what I've been through with my daughter.
Sure.
And the psychiatrist told me that he thought I should make him, because I was an alcoholic and I knew the steps of the alcoholism, I should maybe go out and make amends to my daughter and my first wife. So my wife went with me on a motorcycle ride out to Bangor, Maine, where they were buried. And I wrote a little letter to them and set it at her graveside, but my wife was right there at my shoulder. So,
Well, can we go back to Vietnam for a minute?
Sure.
I mean, did you go back into the military at all after through all of this?
no, I'm sorry. I didn't
Okay.
state
So,
that very well.
yeah, no worries. But when you landed in Vietnam, What was that like when you landed there? I mean, you got to remember that this was probably your first trip out of the country or
Right.
something, or.
Yes. And it was hot,
Hmm.
and but I knew the airplane I was going to be working on. I got assigned to a squadron and made some very good friends. Um, and I worked there for a year
And were
before.
you in a hangar?
No, no, no. We were out.
Oh,
They were the planes were kept in what's called revetments. They are a place where an aircraft can be parked, be loaded with bombs, but if a rocket or something hit in there and blew them up, it wouldn't blow up the aircraft around them because they were protected by these basically walls of steel that were about 3 feet thick, filled with rock and things like that to prevent a blast from going outside. So if one aircraft blew up, it wouldn't blow up all the rest of them.
well, that's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some military does something good.
S-
Um, when I got on the police department, I don't know if you're ready for this now yet, but I went on the street patrol as all officers usually start out to do, and I did that for the first 4 years.
mhm,
And then they were looking for people to go on the canine unit,
mhm,
and I had a lot of experience with animals,
mhm.
pets, and other such things. And the lieutenant that was in charge met with me and talked to me, and I wound up getting on the canine unit. Which of the 22 and a half years I was on the police department, I was on canine for 15 of those years.
Wow.
And 8 of those years of the 15, I was the department trainer. So I trained most of the dogs on the department and retrained them and trained them in bombs and narcotics and the normal street patrol work.
Did you happen to have any dogs over in Vietnam? Did
No,
you, in other words, was this like a seed that was planted that you ended up later, or no?
right. No, I always have been a real love of animals.
Okay.
And I've always had good luck training animals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so I got assigned to the canine unit, and like I said, it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. It was the greatest job in the world.
Oh.
Unfortunately, my sergeant that was in the unit was promoted and transferred out, and they transferred in a new sergeant who didn't know anything about canine, nothing. And he decided, with my 15 years of experience, he was going to tell me how to train dogs. So I wasn't about to listen to him because we didn't get along at all. And I wanted to possibly get into investigations. Well, the only place you could get into investigations is if you were promoted to either a sergeant or a lieutenant. Well, I had never taken a promotional exam because I loved where I was in the canine unit. So I never even tried to get promoted. So I went to one of the lieutenants in training, and I asked him where I could go. And he said, there's only two places you can go without a promotion, and that's in either undercover narcotics or vice. And I didn't like the sounds of vice, so I said I'd take narcotics. So I went undercover narcotics for 2.5 years. And that's where I was when I retired from the department.
Okay. Wow. Well, thank you for your service in the police force. Can we go back to Vietnam, though? I
Okay.
want to go back to your military segment of your life and
Okay.
talk about that a little bit so that this veteran history project with the military part. Um, you were loading and you made friends over there. How long were you in country?
A year.
A year.
Yes.
Okay. And how long were you in the military total?
Well, because I got that early out, I was
Mm-hmm.
only actually in 3.5 years.
Okay.
I had signed up for 4, but I got out in 3.5 because of that early out program.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And is there anything about the military that you can say that was a really good experience for you? I mean, do you have any takeaways that are positive from your learning?
Well, other than making some very good friends,
Uh-huh.
and I can't really say that I learned that much from the military because there really aren't too many jobs that you can get outside the military where you're loading bombs and missiles on the aircraft.
Right.
So I knew I had to get something else, and that's why I
You
went
switched.
ultimately got in the police department.
Yes.
Now, as far as the military, um, the one thing that I did find out that I did do, and this started me on my drinking career, was I started drinking pretty heavy in Vietnam, and it was kind of a bad thing because a good friend of mine who was on a different load crew, I was the crew chief on a load crew, and means I had three guys working for me unloading bombs and everything. He one time he saw me loading a fuse into a bomb, and my hands were shaking so bad I could hardly get the screw started in. And he said, "Come over to my hooch tonight. I want to talk to you." And he told me, he says, "You got to quit drinking." And so he said, "Quit drinking," but he got me going on marijuana. So I spent the rest of the time I was in Vietnam, except when I had a chance, I would drink still, but I smoked marijuana a lot. And I also was sent to Korat, Thailand, because the uh, military
Hmm.
needed to have personnel trained on other aircraft that could land in our base that maybe needed downloading or taking the munitions off after they landed or safed up anyway. So I went to Korat, Thailand. I was there for a week, and I learned download procedures on the F-105, and then I also went to ba- uh, another base in Vietnam
Hmm.
where I learned on the F-4C. But like I said, none of my military experience did anything to help me in the outside.
I understand. But do you stay in touch with any of your friends from the
No,
military?
no,
Not now?
I haven't
Okay.
really been in touch because it's a little different now when the guys come back from they come back as a unit,
Hmm.
and where in Vietnam you basically shift over there by yourself, kind of, and then you met a group and you were there, but they maybe would you either only maybe they'd already been there 11 months and you were there for a month, so they were gone shortly after you left there, and then others came in, and so we
Oh,
didn't see a real camaraderie
oh,
that stayed on in the military.
interesting. How were you treated when you got home?
Mm.
Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I got spit on. Um,
So sorry.
one woman threw a balloon filled with urine in my face. But now, since that time, I can't tell you, just wearing this hat when I go into different places, I have lots of people that say, "Thank you for your service."
Good. That's and welcome home, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So, when you were coming to the close of your time in Vietnam and you got that 6 month early to come home, where did you come home to?
Well, I was flown from Saigon
Hmm.
into Seattle Tacoma Airport,
Hmm.
where I
SeaTac?
was discharged at port of entry.
Oh, you were.
Yeah, because they
Okay.
had said anybody that had less than 6 months left on your enlistment,
Hmm.
which I did because of that early out thing.
Hmm.
Um, you were discharged at port of entry. So I was discharged in Seattle Tacoma, and then I flew back to Minneapolis.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. And were your parents there waiting for you?
Oh yeah, they
You
were.
remember that?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Good.
They didn't get right down to the gate, but they were waiting back by baggage checkout where I could get my duffel bag and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
I bet they were so happy to have you home. I mean, we lost a lot of people in Vietnam, so
Yeah,
for you to come
I
home,
still go out to the wall in
do you?
Washington.
Do you?
Yeah,
Good.
got friends on there.
God. Yeah, you mentioned about this experience where you lost your friend.
Right.
Can you tell us more about that, or is that
Well, he wasn't in the my career field. He was an air policeman.
okay?
And one day we were getting rocketed, and we jumped into our mobile van that we hauled munitions, some fuses and things in like that, and headed for a bunker while the rockets were coming in. Well, as we were heading towards our bunker, a rocket hit, and my friend was standing right there on the corner and was hit. So
So sorry. So, after that happened, how long from when that happened to when you got to come home? I mean, it was a big span of time that you had to live with those thoughts,
well, he
or
was killed during the Tet Offensive when we were really getting hammered over there.
okay.
and that was in January or 67 or 68
Mhm.
in January.
Okay.
And I didn't come home until the following August.
Oh, okay. So this was, yeah, okay. Um, when you came home and you got back to Minnesota
Mm-hmm.
and you'd done all your out processing, it sounds like at SeaTac.
Yes.
Okay. And so you were a free man then. You were veteran when you landed then in Minnesota. And what has been your experience as a veteran all these years?
Uh, well, for some time, I didn't even know I was entitled to any kind of veterans benefits at all. And I didn't learn about that for quite some time. And then I finally got involved with the veterans, the VA,
Mm-hmm.
and they have different categories of what your disabilities might be for different reasons.
Okay.
And originally, it was just they help cover my cost of prescriptions and that sort of things
Mm-hmm.
for any ailments that I had.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Needless to say, I had a lot of sleep problems, uh, dreams, nightmares. Uh, so the VA has put me on medicine for quite some time, and they still are, and I still do receive those. But my disability rating went up to 60% of a total disability, and then it went up to 70%. And then about 3 years ago, I was starting to have a lot of problems with stumbling, falling, and I got into find out that I had, because of my exposure to Agent Orange in Vietnam, I had Parkinson's disease. And when that happened, and towards the end of before I really even knew it was Parkinson's disease, I had fallen down in the kitchen of my house and laid my head wide open. And my wife went me to the emergency room in Marble Falls, and they stitched me up. But that they did a scan on my brain, and they found out I had a brain bleed. So they sent me to an emergency room up by Temple, and I was in there for a couple of weeks. And then they sent me to a rehab hospital. I had to learn to walk and stuff like that to get because of the brain bleed.
Oh, I have. Again, thank you for your service. I'm so sorry that you had experience with that Agent Orange.
Well, a lot of people had a lot worse than I did.
Yeah. Well, did you have you found with your? It sounds like you've had a good VA experience
Yes, pretty much.
overall.
Uh,
Good. And did you join like a VFW or have you gotten involved with any associations, veteran associations?
yeah, I'm a member of the Marble Falls VFW. I haven't been real active with them, but they send me a newsletter so I know what's going on and things like that. But
Good.
just haven't really done that much with them yet.
Yeah. What would you say was your best memory from Vietnam?
Hmm. Actually, that's kind of funny. Anybody that's in Vietnam gets a trip out of country for a year. I mean, a week, and I didn't take mine. Um, I had thought about thinking about my wife and my daughter back home, and I wanted to save as much money as I could from my pay. So instead of going it and wasting it on a trip for myself, I just didn't go because I was going to go on a week's trip from my base in Phan Rang down to Bangkok, and then from Bangkok up to Karat. Well, in that time, we got to spend a week in nice hotels and everything else in between flying back and forth. So I considered that my vacation.
Hmm.
So that we had a good time.
Good. Good.
And I also got to see the Bob Hope concert, which was real life.
Where
That was
was
special.
yes, where was that?
That was in Phan Rang at the base I was stationed.
Oh,
He was when he was traveling to
with
different
the
bases.
USO,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, the USO.
And were you close? Were you close to him? Could you see him?
I got relatively close, but what was more important, I shouldn't say this, somebody in my command, I don't know where he was, but knew somebody from the Bob Hope show, and he got some of the people from the Bob Hope show to come to our squadron after the show, and I actually got to sit next to Raquel Welch.
Oh, oh my word. Not too many people get to say
I know,
that.
that's for sure.
you should be you should be leading this with
Yeah.
that. Good for you. Good for you. That's awesome. So, may I ask also the time before you went to Vietnam, and I know this is kind of rewinding the tape a little bit, but before you went to Vietnam and you were in your job learning the munitions and things like that, was there a good part of that? Did you learn or meet people, or is there anything that's positive from that segment of pre-Vietnam?
No, not really. That's why I dislike Bangor, Maine so mad. That's why I put in for
Isn't
Vietnam.
that funny? Of course, you didn't know what you were getting into, did you?
No, I did. I did. I knew what I was doing.
Did you? Okay, good. And so, since you've been home and you had this illustrious career and you were doing the narcotics portion, may I ask how that went for you since you had had the alcoholism with the marijuana and all of that? Did you find that that was a struggle at all for you to be around other people that were, selling or using or
No,
any of
no.
that?
As a matter of fact, I didn't get involved with Alcoholics Anonymous until sometime after that, after I was off the police department.
Oh, I see.
So that's when I got involved with
Oh, I see.
AA, and
Okay.
then still am.
Oh, good. Good. And how about, may I ask about your faith? Is it sort of thing where they say that everybody in a foxhole has faith or whatever? Did you find that your faith was, you know, important to you at any part of your journey with the military or experiences that way? Or
I didn't see anything as far as religious beliefs when I was in the military. I really didn't get involved with too much church until actually I was out of the military, and I was actually off of the police department. After I left the police department, uh, I went to work at my church as a full-time custodian,
uh-huh.
where I had to get a engineer's license to operate the boiler and everything else. And I was there for 5 years. And the pastor and I, Pastor Cruz, became just the best of friends. I used to walk into his office and tell him an off-colored joke, and he'd laugh. And I told him that I was only going to be there for 5 years because I was building a home up in Ladysmith, Wisconsin. And he said, "Well, when you leave, Al, I'm leaving." And he did.
Wow. Where'd he go?
He just retired.
Oh, you just retired.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So the chaplaincy over there, you didn't really have, no,
Never saw one.
never saw a chaplain while you were in Vietnam. That's amazing. Well, that's too bad. But okay, that's interesting. So when you got back and you went through the police, and now what are you doing now? Since your retirement from the police department, what's your life been like, or what are you doing now? How did you get to Texas, for instance?
Well, my wife graduated from high school in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
Her father was a lifer Army. He, believe it or not, he did stints towards the end of World War II, part of Korea, and he was in Vietnam about the same time I was. So he was in three branches, or three wars basically. Um, so she traveled with him in the military before she graduated from high school, and then she went to school and got got secretarial training.
Mm-hmm.
And then her sister, her oldest sister, Cecilia,
Mm-hmm.
she was living up in Minnesota at the time, and my wife decided to move up there and be around her, and she got a job as a secretary in a law firm there, and then she ultimately wound up going to work for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. And that's actually how we became acquainted because she was working on the drug prosecution unit, and I was bringing all these cases up that I was bringing up for prosecution, and she saw me and I saw her, and we, well, actually, what clicked was we met in a bar, which wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but that's in the past. Anyway, we,
Yeah.
thank God we're beyond that.
Good. So anyway, so the move came to Texas because she got a job in Texas? Or?
No, she was still working in Minnesota for
Uh-huh.
the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, and I was building a house over in Ladysmith, Wisconsin, and I was also working as at the church
Mhm.
at that same time. But when I can't remember, oh, it got to be the point where we were ready to move over to our house in Wisconsin after I got it built,
Mhm.
and she quit the county attorney's office, and we moved over to our house in Wisconsin.
Okay. And how did you get to Texas?
Oh well, uh, we in the time we were in Ladysmith, um, we bought a motorhome, and we decided we were going to travel.
Mhm.
So we started traveling, trying to do the wintertime in the north
Mhm.
and the summertime. Wait a minute, wintertime in the south.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Yes.
Yeah, where we were going to stay in comfortable temperatures all the time.
Certainly.
So we started traveling, and we were full-time RVers for I think 6.5 years,
Wow.
where we didn't have a house because we had sold our house in Wisconsin. We just had our motorhome, and it was a big 40-foot diesel pusher that was really plush.
Mhm.
And then we wound up, after we decided we were going to quit traveling, we sold the big motorhome, got a smaller one, and we had a house built over in Bastrop,
Mhm.
Texas. Well, then I can't remember, I forget the years now. We were working, still traveling in the smaller motorhome and
Mhm.
going up to Minnesota and managing an RV park for Dakota County Parks
Hmm.
in Minnesota. And while we were up there, the wildfires started in Bastrop, and our house was destroyed. I mean, there was nothing left of it but about 2 feet of ash on top of the concrete.
Oh, so
Everything was
sorry.
destroyed. We lost everything.
Wow. Sorry.
Luckily, we had with us, because we were working up there. We were in our motorhome. We had our car. We had both of our motorcycles, and we had enough clothes for spring, summer, and fall winters or spring, summer, and fall in Minnesota. So we had all those clothes with, and other than that, everything was destroyed. But it turned out better because we moved over here to Burnett, which we like even better, and we got really great neighbors.
Wonderful. Good. Before we conclude, is there anything else that you would like to share regarding your military service?
Uh, just for any veterans that aren't now involved with the VA, do so, please. It can save your life. We lose veterans every day to suicide, and there's a lot of people that probably would not lose their life if they got in touch with the VA over their drinking or their emotional problems or whatever else. But I encourage everybody to get involved with the VA.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. We also have the chaplaincy corps within the military branches. And I always encourage people, if they're having any troubles, to reach out to the chaplain in the area
Right.
as well. But after they get out, you're absolutely right
Yeah.
as well.
I still see psychology people and psychiatrists, but it's just to keep in touch and keep my head above water.
Yeah. Well, you look like you're doing quite well considering.
Not,
And so I want to say thank you very much,
oh, thank you,
Sergeant,
Cindy.
and welcome home.
Thank you.